without having a role model or somebody to at least influence you in a positive light or give you some kind of direction in life to make you think, okay, well, this is how they did it. So it seems like a natural thing for you. If you
Hmm.
grew up with somebody who's a very tidy person that's always doing tasks and like do it yourself, or like you're gonna grow up and you're gonna already know how to do half of this stuff. You're already gonna like feel confident to even try it because you watch somebody do it your whole life.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
I just had an interview with Jesse Cretney. He's a musician, he's a rap artist, and we talked about that, but we also talked about his life. Growing up as like, he wasn't a Native American, but he wasn't totally a white person, and kind of like the racial tension there as he grew up, and also just like how he went from being in a really bad spot, stuff that he had to go through in his life, how he got into fights and drinking and all that kind of stuff, and how he's really turned his life around now. He's married, he's got 4 kids, he's got a steady job, and he loves music. He's a real artist at heart. So I really enjoy this interview, and I know you will too. All right, we have Jesse Cretney on the podcast today. Jesse is a guy that I met kind of through like a friend of a friend. You're actually married to a friend of mine and her sister, so Charity Cretney. It used to be Charity Kerr. So that was really a really cool connection. So anyways, Jesse, I love what you're doing. I love your music, and just really excited to have this conversation. I've been really excited about it, and I want to tell the audience too that this is like been a long time coming because we were trying to schedule it, but you have so much going on and I have a lot going on, and it was just very difficult to get together. So we're finally doing it. I'm really excited. So Jesse, welcome to the Carla Rand Show. I'm so happy you're here.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
It was quite a long time coming.
Yeah, like, it could have been longer, but so Jesse is a welder. So he's welding, he's up by Grand Prairie, he's from Alberta, kind of Red Deer area. Is that right, Jesse?
Yeah, I'm from Rocky Mountain House originally.
Okay.
And
so
I live in Lacombe now.
You live in Lacombe, okay. And then you're up at Grand Prairie doing work, and then you're also, a husband. You're also a father of 4. So you're traveling around doing work, you're welding, and you're a husband, you're a father, and you're also a musician. So you're trying to do your music in between all of that. How does that work, Jesse? Like, how is that working for you?
Well, it's quite overwhelming at times. Like, to be honest with you, music is one of them things. It's like a passion that I'm very driven to do, and once I get started on it, it almost becomes like an obsession. It's very borderline obsessive.
Right.
So the balance is not necessarily easy to find with the children and the wife and the work and the stuff. Actually, when I'm away on the road, it gives me a lot more of an opportunity to work on the music because I don't have the family duties at night.
Right. Yeah.
So when I'm home, it's a little bit more limited, and so I try to find the balance. And Charity's definitely had to give me a whip with the old ball and chain every so often and say, "Okay, I need you to be here a little more." So then I got to step my husband game up a bit every so often. I need a little reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I'm the same. Like, I can get like obsessed with the stuff that I'm doing as well. And just kind of be like, oh, this is so great. Let's do this. And then it's like, yeah, but Carla, you have other commitments. And so trying to find that balance has been a struggle, but I feel like I'm making progress, Jesse. Like, I'm not there, but I'm making progress. So that's good. But let's kind of go back. Let's give our audience kind of some context to who you are, Jesse. So you grew up in Rocky Mountain House. Can you tell us a little bit more about your childhood? I know you had maybe not a typical childhood. It was a little bit rough, I would say, just from my conversation with you before. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I grew up in Rocky Mountain House. I was born in Calgary. We moved to Rocky when I was about 3 years old. And it was a pretty tough thing at times. Like, my parents always provided for me everything that I could have ever needed, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them kind of came from a mixed background as well. Like, my mom is from Ontario and my father is from Alberta, but he grew up mostly in foster homes. And my mother, she was kind of, she was a mother when she was, I think, 15 or 16 years old. She had her first child, my oldest sister, Rhonda. They grew up a little bit different. And then my dad, growing up in foster homes, he was abused and kind of, I don't know, I guess he didn't really have a lot of love in his life at times. And it pushed him out. And he was living on the streets for quite a few years as a teenager and stuff. And then got into he got into lots of trouble back when he was a teenager, and got into the drugs, and there was a lot of stuff going on back then in the 70s, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
so then when we moved to Rocky, Dad was trying to make a better life for himself, and he became a truck driver. And so he was gone a lot, and Mom mostly took care of us. So then I kind of became a little bit of an asshole of a kid at times,
Okay.
because I didn't really have a fatherly figure at home all the time to, you know, give that fatherly love or spanking or whatever's needed at times.
Tough love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of got a little carried away and sort of just did whatever it was that I felt I needed to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of time in town, actually, which is kind of weird because I grew up out in Rocky, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's very beautiful, similar to
Mm-hmm.
Whitecourt. There's the mountains are an hour away, and we've
Mm-hmm.
got creeks and rivers and lakes and all sorts of good stuff there. A nice mix of uh, poplar and deciduous trees, and
Yeah.
so it's I never spent a lot of time outdoors actually growing up. It was kind of unfortunate. I got into hunting as a man. As an adult now, I'm into hunting and I like spending time outdoors. But as a kid, I just wanted to be in town and be around friends and try to, I was more or less just wanted to be accepted growing up. And
Mm.
I never really was. I was always sort of the black sheep because I'm a treaty Indian, which I didn't realize until now. I was always thought that I was maybe half or a 16th is what I thought I was my whole
Mm.
life. I still don't know what the fractions are now,
Mm.
but regardless, I wasn't a white guy and I wasn't one of the Indian guys from the reservation, so I didn't really fit in anywhere. So I kind of had to push my way in, and I did a lot of silly things as a kid just to try to be accepted by the popular kids,
Mm.
and yeah. So I made a lot of mistakes as a teenager, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that sort of led me down the wrong path at times, and I got caught up doing all sorts of stuff that I hopefully my kids will never do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had a life that was, your upbringing sounds a little bit rough. It sounds also like your parents had a bit of a rough upbringing. So they're trying to raise you. They probably don't have a lot of maybe good examples in their life. They're trying to figure it out. So at one time when we were talking before, you said, like, at one point you thought you weren't even going to live past 30. Because I said, oh, well, what were your goals and aspirations? You're like, I didn't even know if I was going to live past 30. So why did you say that? Why did you think you weren't going to live past 30?
Well, I definitely lived a lot more reckless than your typical person would have at that age. I think I
Mm.
was always living on the edge and trying to push my boundaries whichever way I could. Like I was very athletic as a kid, and I got into sports heavily. And then I got into boxing, and I boxed for quite a few years. I actually went to nationals and won 10 gold medals in boxing.
Wow.
Sorry,
Cool.
my microphone keeps sagging on me here.
Okay.
But yeah, so then I just lived really recklessly. Like I was always fighting at the bars almost every weekend. We were fighting all the time. Like
Mm.
I wasn't picking fights or starting fights, but I was always there. If somebody was ever causing a problem, then I'd be the guy that would deal with it, just because that was kind of my role in the society. I guess
You
I
were
was
the
always,
boxer. You had to like take care of business, right?
yeah, and like all through my school years, I was also uh, I would always look after anybody who was getting bullied. Like I really don't like bullies. I didn't like getting bullied as myself personally. I didn't like getting bullied, so I was always looking after the people who did get bullied in school and try to
Mm.
set an example for anybody who was going to be bullying people that maybe you shouldn't do that around here.
Yeah, and why? What was the main reason that you got bullied? Do you think, Jesse?
It was mostly a racial thing, kind of, and
Okay.
then we weren't wealthy either. So you know how kids are. They're pretty vicious at times. Like,
Mm.
you don't have the fancy clothes, or you don't have the good snacks at lunchtime, or
Right. Yeah.
the nice shoes. And mom and dad didn't have a fancy car.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And so you were bullied, and then you wanted to like help other people not get bullied. But in the midst of it, then, so like kind of in your teen years, would you say you ended up kind of getting in a lot of trouble, did a lot of things that you said you don't want your kids to do, and I get that, right? So how did you get then from that person who's getting themselves in all kinds of trouble to where you are now, where you're married, you've got kids, you've got a steady job, you're doing music? Like, how did that all happen, Jesse?
Well, I guess I would say there were some eye openers for sure. Like
Mm-hmm.
at one point in time, I got in trouble with the law there, and nearly ended up serving some time in jail.
Mm.
and that was an eye opener. And then I actually had a really bad month. I crashed my Tahoe. I had an old '98 Tahoe that I crashed one night and rode it off, and then a week later got in trouble with the law. Spent some time in detention, a week or so, just while I was waiting for my trial, and then got out of the remand there in Red Deer, and I was out for about 7 days, and I crashed my street bike and T-boned a truck doing 130 kilometers an hour.
Gee.
So I was lucky to live that one up,
Wow.
and then after that, they said I wouldn't walk for a year. And I mean, being athletic as a youngin', that was kind of disheartening. And I didn't think it was gonna. I thought life was gonna be different forever. And I mean, in some ways, it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't frolic the same way I used to. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
So that was an eye opener, and it made me just kind of take life a little bit more seriously. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the long run, I was still being a jackass for several years after that, and it wasn't until I met Charity and we had our daughter Isla that I really took life more seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and my career and my goals and my passions and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely has been driven by the love for my children and the need to provide for them, right?
Mm-hmm. What did it do for you? So when you first had your first child and you were like, okay, I got to get my stuff together now. How did that impact you? Why did that impact you so much? What was the
Well,
thought process?
I was at a stage in my career where I was about to take that next step, regardless.
Okay.
It just kind of made me feel more accountable. Like before, when it was just me, that's when I didn't care. I was very careless. I didn't think I would live to be 30 years old, and then here I am. I'm 26 years old, 25 years old, with like busted up legs, and I'm all of a sudden I get my welding ticket, and my job forever is going to be to weld and kneel and bend over and do all the things that I'm maybe not necessarily cut out to do physically anymore. But
Right.
so that aside, it was just the fact that I had to, my dad, if there wasn't, I guess you could say when I was a kid, my dad maybe didn't give us a lot. He didn't provide us with a lot, but he always worked really hard. He was always working to make sure that we're eating. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe he wasn't real good with his finances, and he had a bit of an alcoholic problem. So that,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol kind of is a poison in everybody's brain. If you're an alcoholic, it sort of fogs what your priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, I didn't want to make the same mistakes as my father.
Mm-hmm.
And many other people too. Like I've definitely have not been the greatest with my finances so far, but I
Okay.
mean, that's a learning curve that we all got to go through.
That's right. Yeah. And I think too, like, I find like when we don't have the proper role models in our life, I don't want to say proper, but like when we don't have role models in life that demonstrate how to manage money, how to, take care of your wife, how to take care of your kids, how to work a job, whatever, all these things that you need to do to get through life, then you need to find somebody else. Like you need to find that role model. If you don't have it there, you got to find it somewhere. And I know for me, like in my business, I had to really look for, I mean, obviously my dad was one, but like I had to look for those role models because a lot of my friends and peers, they weren't going out and doing a business, right? And so I think it's the same thing probably with you, where you have to start looking outside maybe of your family and saying, okay, who can I look up to here? Who can I sort of model my life a little bit after?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely the case, because prior to that, yeah, without having a role model or somebody to at least influence you in a positive light or give you some kind of direction in life to make you think, okay, well, this is how they did it. So it seems like a natural thing for you. If you grew up with somebody who's a very tidy person that's always doing tasks and like do it yourself, or like you're going to grow up and you're going to already know how to do half of this stuff. You're already going to like feel confident to even try it because you watched somebody do it your whole life.
Yeah. And how much has that impacted you, Jesse? Like, I don't know exactly what your life was like. I've only known a couple of things that you've shared here, but was there certain things that you just like, what was it like to try to figure that out? Because I mean, for me, I had a good model of a mom. I had a good model of a dad. Like I had family that like all around me, like we kept the house clean. Like there was all that kind of stuff going on. People, had steady work, but like when you don't have that modeled, what does that look like for you? Like, how did you figure that out?
Well, I'm still figuring it out.
Okay.
Ask Charity.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but
we should have her on.
It's a learning thing, and like my mom, our house wasn't a pigsty or nothing like that. Like she wasn't a grade A hoarder or nothing like that. Like my mom's, her house is nice and clean, and
Yeah.
but dad being gone all the time, right? And then because dad was alcoholic, his hobbies didn't ever include, like, he would never did any woodwork, never once. I don't think that I ever witnessed. I never did anything like that with him. And he used to guide up in the mountains for several years. He'd go away for 6 months at a time and guide hunters up in northern BC. And then he would come home, and I guess maybe he didn't want to hunt anymore. Like, I don't even think I went hunting with my dad more than a handful of times as a child, even though he knew how to do all that stuff very well. And but dad was also into the horses and all of this stuff, and I kind of leaned away from that once I started becoming a teenager, because I wanted to hang out with all the cool kids in town and ride skateboards and pedal bikes, and then eventually cars, and
Right.
chasing girls and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really, as a teenager, unless you have a really strong bond with your parents and you're younger, as a teenager, you're more than likely going to just want to spend your time with other people and doing other things,
Right.
pursuing. And I feel like I've always just had this major craving to be around people and, like, entertaining, I guess, is something that's just always been a part of me, like being the class clown ever since I was a kid. And always just, I felt like even when I would go out as an adult and I would go out drinking to the bar or whatever, I would almost just be like, it'd be like my one chance. Maybe somebody will want to hear me rap or something like this,
Yeah.
It's kind of sad to say, but I feel like a lot of the time it was just me trying to chase, like, I wanted to have that, be able to entertain people. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess sometimes it did work out that way, where I'd end up with a random crowd of people that were into rap music and wanted to do that or whatever. But, most people grown up folks around Alberta don't necessarily listen to rap music. So it's one of those things that I'm still kind of one of the black sheep, that I never really fit in that well with everybody else.
Well, how did you get into rap music? Because it would make a lot more sense for you to be a country artist, growing up in Alberta, or even like pop or even rock maybe. But yeah, like, how did you get into rap specifically?
Well, I guess the first time I heard rap music, I fell in love with the beat and the instrumentals right away, right? And then the poetry, I always liked that as well. And then the culture, I think, is what brought me into it as well, because the flashy lights and all the, it looked really cool when we were kids, I guess. But yeah, more so, like, I used to really enjoy language arts as a child in school. That was one of the things I excelled at. And so poetry was always a big thing for me when I was growing up. And then I kind of just found it as like almost like therapy. You could write, or because I used to freestyle rap a lot, which is just off the top of your head, improv. And it's like therapy. You would, like, say all sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily talk about otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, my husband does that, but it's more like Dr. Seuss rhymes. So it's like dad jokes and stuff. Like, it's just a whole different kind of genre, I think.
Yeah, but that's fun too, though, right?
It is, yeah. So what made you do that? I mean, that takes a lot of confidence, Jesse, to just suddenly, go in front of a bunch of people and start doing some kind of rap. Like, why did you do that? Like,
well, it was only amongst a tight circle for years and years. I would never do that in front of, like, I spent a lot of my youth feeling ashamed of being Native American, growing up in, like, a white town where everybody was, the reservations near Rocky, the Indians would come into town. Sorry for calling them Indians. I don't know. I'm Indian. I'm Aboriginal, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
First Nations. Let's edit that.
Sure.
Okay. So the First Nations would come in off the reservation, and almost every weekend the kids from town and the kids from the reservation would be fighting each other. And this has been going on ever since, the beginning of the colonization of Canada, where the two people were fighting, right? So you kind of have a bit of a spite on both sides already. And
you find
I forgot what we were going to.
You find yourself kind of in the middle of that, because you said, and then you had this tight group of people that you were doing the rap with, right? And
yeah, so that's what I was saying. It was a tight knit thing where I was kind of I grew up sort of feeling ashamed of my ethnicity, and then I liked rap music, but most people didn't like it, so that was another thing that I kind of had to keep to myself. Like, I went to work in the oil field, and most of these guys in the oil field, they're like, old Dutch gentlemen or whatever, like,
Mm-hmm.
Not very many of them would ever even accept rap music as music. They would mostly call it crap or noise or whatever, so
Right.
it wasn't something that I necessarily advocated when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
It was just because if too many people knew about that, then maybe I wouldn't even get a job or something. I was worried.
So you're not like running around with your hand up saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm First Nations and I love rap music and I'm going to do like a little freestyle for you right now." Like you weren't running around with your hand up doing that.
No,
Okay.
no.
So those were things that you were, I don't know if you want to say ashamed, but you just kind of, you didn't want to put it out there because you were kind of worried how you would be received.
Well, honestly, I was a little embarrassed because I was growing up and taught to, Indians, everyone made fun of Indians, and it made me feel like, well, then I'm less of a person or something.
Mm,
And a lot of people don't understand that. People that, they say the privilege, that term privilege that goes around and everything. And yes, it's kind of stupid in one way, but in the other way, without ever actually being in that position where you actually have to be in them shoes, where you have to feel how that is, and you really don't know what it is. And that's if one thing I'd like to always just is be in the middle, because I've always been in the middle anyway, and I like get to argue both sides to
yeah.
everybody. Somebody wants to argue, I can argue all day.
Yeah.
You,
Well,
you know, b- and just people don't recognize the feelings that other people have. It's pretty hard to be empathetic when you don't know what it's like to genuinely be in a circumstance where somebody else is in a circumstance that they can't control, and yet, a lot of people will blame the individual or the group in any case, whatever the case may be, but yet it's not the individual and it's not the group that has created the circumstance.
mhm. Yeah, and I wasn't planning on talking about this at all, but is there anything else that you would like to tell people that are like listeners about maybe how, the like being like First Nations or being, the white people or whatever? Like, is there anything that you think that we should hear, from your perspective?
Well, I don't really want to get caught up in the racial bargo, but uh, yeah, I don't know. I just honestly think that if you treat everybody how you want to be treated, then the world would be a pretty good place. Like, put yourself in everyone else's shoes. Like, it doesn't matter what somebody looks like today or tomorrow. You don't
Mhm.
know what the circumstances are that brought them to where they are right now, and maybe all they need is somebody to talk to, and maybe they've gone too far, and there's nothing you can say or do to help them. And whatever it is, it doesn't mean that it gives you any kind of a right to treat them any other way than what you would want to be treated. Unless, of course, somebody's being insulting or whatever. Take it
Mhm.
with a grain of salt or do what you got to do. But for the most part, I just always treat everyone how I want to be treated and how I'd like my kids to be treated and how I'd like to see my wife be treated and so on
Mhm.
and so forth. And to judge books by the cover is not, I try not to do that either. I mean,
Mhm.
we're all guilty of sitting at the shopping mall and people watching and be like, "Look at that." Hee
You're right.
hee.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fun too, and that's all just fun. But I mean, to go and pick on somebody, or if there's kids out there listening right now, like if there's a kid in your class that has any kind of disability or somebody's battling with weight issues or something, and you go up there and you're going to make fun of them about it, that's not a very, I don't know, it's not something to be proud of. I would say, if anything, you should try to help the people that can't really help themselves.
Mhm.
And if there's any time in your life that you're in a position where you can help somebody up, and then why not?
Yeah, I feel like maybe like in a different situation, Jesse, you would be the equalizer. You would go out, right? Like, do you ever see yourself that way? I don't know if you've seen that movie or heard about that, the equalizer, right? But like you go out and like try to fix all the wrongs and try to make sure like the bad guys pay their dues or whatever if they're bullying and causing problems with other people. Have you ever sort of saw yourself in that light?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been in that light. Like,
Okay.
I've always, all the fighting and stuff I talked about that I used to do, it was almost always I was standing up for somebody. Somebody
Okay.
was bullying somebody, or somebody was trying to grease on some of the girls at the bar and they didn't like it. And a lot of the girls in Rocky would look to me to protect them if I was around. And a
Hmm.
lot of the dudes in Rocky weren't like me that would fight at it, the drop of a hat. So a lot of them would kind of stand behind people like me, and there wasn't very many people like me.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, good on you for doing that. It's too bad that, it has to be that way. I think it's interesting, like when I hear of people like you, like, talking about some of this racial stuff, and I know that you're not trying to say like, woe is me or poor me. I know you're not saying that, but like I grew up in a situation very much where like I've never really judged people based on like their skin color, their race, their economic status, anything like that. Like that just isn't part of my fiber. So when I would see other people doing that, like it would just it seems sort of foreign to me. Now, I'm not saying that there probably isn't still some like stereotypical things that I would notice if I see somebody like a homeless person on the street and maybe I'm like, oh, like I have this thought, right? Like, oh, it's they're that ethnicity or whatever. So I mean, it's probably still there to an extent, but but to me, like, yeah, I'm kind of the same. Like, I don't care what you look like. I don't care. Like, just don't be a jerk, right? Like, I judge you by how you act, not like anything else, right? Like to me, that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny because so many people are, we're I think in Alberta we were almost it was like bred into us. Maybe not necessarily where you grew up, but where I grew up, everybody it's almost second nature. And I don't think any of the people that I've heard do it in firsthand are actually legitimately racist people.
Mm,
It's just like jokes. Like there was a time there where I would say racial slurs all the time to try to beat people to the punch.
mm.
I figured if I would make a comment first, then they couldn't, and it would like break the ice. And then if it would just make things easier on me. I always just had to get that tension out of there because I always felt like, is there some kind of lingering thing here that I don't really realize? And I wanted to clear the air, so I would always do it first, and
Mm, yeah.
it kind of yeah, it sort of escalated into me just really being a jackass for a few years there.
Okay. But I can understand why you'd want to do that though. Like I can picture that right now, Jesse. Like, somebody's coming, you're thinking, I wonder if they're thinking that. So I might as well just say it. Let's just clear the air here. Okay. Like let's get the racist jokes out of the way. Okay. Now let's like get on with our life, right? Or get on with our time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so you like rap, you like the sound of rap. What got you into, cause you recorded a record or like you kind of recorded a full album this past year, right?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
did that go? Tell me about that process. What led you to do that?
Well, I guess it was about November of 2019. I finally decided to actually sit down and write a full song, an
Mm,
entire song. And I mean, over the years when I was a teenager, I started writing back then, but I would just write like full loose leaf papers full of rhymes without any kind of structure or any kind of format. Like had no clue about music
mhm,
and how to write. I didn't even know how to count bars
mhm.
or nothing like that. Like I learned a little bit of music in grade six, but uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, because I started writing in November was the first song that I tried to write, and I actually produced my own instrumental for it on GarageBand,
Mm,
and I released it on YouTube. And then I thought, man, I need to get like some professional sound and production here. So then I started looking. I found out that you could get beats on BeatStars, and more or less all of this came to me. I started talking to another rapper that's kind of local to here. He's from Pinoka. Fiction's his name. He
mm,
goes by his moniker. But he explained to me some of the steps that I didn't realize before. And we didn't have this kind of technology when I was a kid, right? And I didn't bother learning it over the last 15 years. But now I just realized, oh, wow, I can do all this stuff myself on my own phone. Like, so I'm able to get professional production that I can lease beats from BeatStars or whatever, and then just record it on my phone on GarageBand. I'm like, wow, I can do this myself. Well, I was going to go into a studio and do it professionally with somebody else, a professional recording engineer, but nobody wanted to do it. It was COVID. The one fellow that I was trying to get into, his wife was pregnant. His studio was at home. He wasn't going to risk it,
mhm,
and he didn't really know me either. And kind of the rap game started a little weird with all the different artists. If they don't know who you are or nothing, then they kind of just slough you off or whatever.
mm,
So either way, I realized, wow, I can do this myself. So I started recording all these reference tracks, excuse me, on GarageBand. And then one thing led to another. I realized I had this contact, Brent Jonathan, B1, the architect from the Lunchroom Poets. He's over from Ontario. He offered a deal to mix and master songs for $40 a song. And typically that's about 100 to $150 a song you're looking at just for mixing and mastering. And then if you want to go into a recording studio, it's like up around 60 to $120 per hour.
mm.
No, that saved me doing it at home, probably saved me like $5,000 at least,
Right. Yeah.
because I'd never been in a studio before. I've never tried to record anything before. I figured it all out on my own, watching YouTube videos and then just kind of testing the water and seeing what happened. And next thing you know, I recorded my entire album by myself without any kind of input from anybody except for the guy that mixed and mastered it for me. And he didn't realize that I had never really done it before. So he kind of just let it go how it was. And he told me in the end that the stuff I was sending them was better than the stuff that the guys that have been saying they'd been doing it for 10 years were sending them. So
Wow. Good for you, Jesse. That's awesome. And actually, I was listening to your album and I was listening to it quite a bit. And I was like, I really like your music. Like, I really like it. So if anybody like, and I think you described it one time as it's like or it has been described as the kind of rap that people that don't usually like rap would like. And I think totally, because I don't typically listen to rap, but it's definitely like, very catchy. And like, I was kind of grooving out to it before one of my workouts. And like, yeah, it's punchy. And you have some other, like your wife sings in it, right? And
yep, my wife sings.
Yeah.
She sings in, I think, 5 or 6 of the songs. And then I've got another lady from Rocky Mountain House that I grew up with also sings on one of the songs. And then I've got another rapper who's from Red Deer that lives in Calgary, Travis Oman. He's featured on one of the tracks as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, and yeah, it sounds really good. And I agree. I think it sounds very professional. Like I listened to it on Spotify and I was just like, this is awesome. This is awesome, Jesse. So what does music,
yes.
No, I'm serious.
It's I was going to say PS, Apple pays artists more than Spotify.
Oh, okay. So that's good to know.
Quite a bit more, like over double.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So Spotify is ripping us off real big time.
Okay.
So get rid of Spotify.
Okay. So
Buy an Apple.
You want me to stream it on Apple instead? Okay, that's good to know.
It pays better. Just for if you're trying to support artists, it's good to know these things. Like even a lot of the artists get caught up in trying to distribute their music and get on Spotify playlists and this and that. But meanwhile, 20,000 plays on Spotify pays like less than half than 10,000 plays on Apple. So why is everybody promoting their music on Spotify when Spotify barely pays?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, Jesse. That makes sense. I had another question for you. So you musicians, artists, even like athletes, like we all have something that we do, right? That kind of, and there's a reason why we do it. Why do you do music? What does music do for you? Whether you're writing, whether you're singing, whatever, what does it do for you? Why do you keep doing it, Jesse? I mean, it's probably not making you millions yet, I'm guessing. So it's probably not just for the money. There's probably some other reason you're doing it.
Oh no, I've definitely made a few million already.
Okay, yeah. I imagine.
Yeah, no, I just love it. I don't know. It's just something that just feels like, for the most part, I used to do it was the freestyling, right? And I would spend hours. I could do it for hours. When I was a kid, we would drive around in the cars around town, do like loser laps around town, and I would rap all night for like the evening. And it just felt so good. Everyone's laughing and having a good time, just dying over the stupid things I'm saying. And it felt so great. Honestly, it's like, it gives you a huge release of endorphins. And then the creativity of it all. I mean, I feel like I'm a very creative person, at my core. I can't really help myself. I always feel like if I'm not creating something, and it's kind of annoying, I'm sure, for my wife, because I'll be like, all of a sudden I'm like, honey, look at this song. You got to listen to this. You got to listen to this. And then like a couple weeks later, all of a sudden I'm like making decorations out of wood or some other total random thing. And then, yeah. So I used to be obsessed with golf.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just, I'm always trying to be creative about something. And if I'm not actually being creative, I sort of get in a slump and I get like down and out a bit if I'm not working on something that feels like a creative outlet for me.
That's so cool. I totally appreciate that. Like, and I'm not, like, I've never saw myself as a creative person, but then I started to realize, like, I did music and stuff, but my music was very, like, structured, right? Like, you sing classical, you stand at the arch of the piano, you project your voice, you breathe this way, you do this, you stand here, you sing soprano, you play piano this way, you do your exam. Like, it was very structured. So I knew all the theory and stuff, but I didn't really just allow myself to have a lot of fun with music. Like, I even played bass guitar, but a lot of the bass guitar, like, I didn't just jam and have fun with it, but I found like other ways. And so for me, it's like my business. When I'm like creating, like setting up business structures and I'm building a team, like I get like that. Like I love this. Like I just want to do this all the time. Like it just feels so good. So I think for me, that's sort of my artistic expression, but I also write too. Like I write poetry and like I love to write. So I think it's so important for us to like, everybody who's listening right now, think about what do you love to do? What lights you up? And for your own mental health, for your sanity, do more of that, right? Like, don't go crazy. Maybe you don't have to get totally obsessed like maybe Jesse gets or like I can get. But, it's fun to get a little obsessed sometimes about stuff.
Yeah, well, if there's something there that actually intrigues you enough, and that's a key, I think, in life, is if if a person could find something that they're doing as a profession, as a child, they always said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And what did you say? I don't know. Everyone's like, "Well, you should be a doctor, or you should be a dentist, or you should be an astronaut, or whatever," right? Nobody ever said, "What do you really like to do?
Yeah.
What do you love to do? What would be the funnest thing to do every day?" Okay, try to do that. Try to do that for a career.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should do for a profession.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that you love to do.
Mm-hmm.
You love doing something, it's not going to feel like a job.
Totally. Yeah. Like, you got to pry, like when I'm doing my business work, it's like you got to pry my fingers off of my phone or off of whatever, because I'm just like, I want to do more. And so, like, yeah, I love it. And I'm so thankful that I can do this. Right. And I think, like, for people who are artistic, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to necessarily be able to do it right away, but like, why not with our kids too? Like, I'm always looking at my kids. I'm like, what do you love to do? You're so good at that. Why don't you do more of that? Here, I'll give you this opportunity. Try this, try that. Give them some opportunities and, like, yeah, let them tap into what they really like to do. I think so many people, and I'm going to say especially guys, but I could be wrong there, but especially guys that I've noticed, they tend to do what's expected. Maybe because they're the typical breadwinners. It's like, well, my dad said I should do this, or my uncle did this, and he said I could make good money, or, like, they don't look inside and be like, what do I actually love? Like you said, Jesse. And I think that's so important for everybody listening, especially for young people. What do you really love? And how can you, like you said, create some sort of career around that? Right? Maybe you won't be like this professional musician right off the hop, but can you do something else creative that's going to fuel that and that's going to light you up so that you're excited to wake up every morning and do it, right? Rather than dreading it and, oh, I can't wait for the weekend. I think that's a sad way to live.
Yeah, and I kind of did it the opposite of what I'm talking about here because, like I said, all those troubled years in my youth, I didn't spend any time focused on what kind of career I was going to have. I didn't think I was going to have a career. I thought, 30 that'd be a long life. So thinking about it back now, I could have spent 15 years up until I was 30 becoming like a master at 1.5 things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
10,000 hours or whatever they say, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't. And I kind of regret it. But at the same time, which kind of gives me a bit of an advantage to a lot of the artists and a lot of the underground rap artists, especially, well, musicians in general, actually, is that I did just follow I went to the oil field. I'm in Alberta. I live in Alberta. The oil field is everywhere. Everybody wants to, so I went and started helping a welder. And then I thought, well, geez, I got to make money anyway. I might as well start my apprenticeship while I'm here. So I started my apprenticeship as a welder, and I didn't want to be a welder, but I knew I was going to have to work, to be able to pay for whatever it was I decided I was ready to do when I was a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, I would have never gotten my ticket. Maybe I would have actually pursued something that I loved instead, but at least gave me the chance to have a good paying job. Mm-hmm. And I had a backup. Like right now, I want to be a musician. I want to do a lot of other things. But welding at least pays for me to be able to afford to buy equipment for this, like my microphone and all this stuff. If it wasn't for having a good paying trade, then I wouldn't be able to do this. A lot of the musicians that have just strictly pursued music are starving and they don't have a trade to go back to. So I'm lucky in that regard.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Yeah. And that is a really good point. Like even for me, right, I have my teaching degree, so I can always go back and be a teacher if I want. I major in music. I can do whatever I want with music, teach lessons, whatever. Minor in English, right? I could be an EA. Like there's a lot of other things that I could do, but it's nice. So it's nice to have that stuff to fall back on, but it's nice to be able to pursue what you like. Can you tell me a little bit about your record? Okay, so like behind you, it says, is it say Iconic Canon Records, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about that. Where did that name come from? Because I think there's a story to that name.
Yeah, well, that's the name of my record label that I created when I released my album. And,
okay.
Iconic Canon, that's my 3 firstborn children's names, Isla, Canon, and Conic, in the sequence they were born. Obviously, I had to switch it up a bit to make it sound like it does, but it had a real catchy ring to it, and I was actually started it up for a woodworking business. When I quit golfing and took up woodworking and started making some really cool custom stuff, and I was trying to sell it online or whatever to my friends or whoever. And I thought it was a very catchy name. and that was the logo that I got made up, and it works well for the record label as well. So I ended up just using it for that, and I haven't really been trying to pursue any of the custom woodwork and stuff because the industry is very
Saturated?
flooded. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very saturated, and it's tough to get into it. Like you can't compete with IKEA or
Right.
Wayfair or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if I actually sell 10 million albums, then
Yeah.
somebody will be like, let's buy some of this custom woodwork that Too Deep made
Yeah.
and sell it for like 10 grand a piece or
Right.
something.
Yeah, and that's the name of your album, or your name is Too Deep?
Yeah, that's my artist name is Too Deep
Okay.
2020 on all the platforms. And I mean, that name goes back to when I was a teenager.
Mm.
I was spending, go hang out at your friend's house. My one friend, Shane D'Amico, Domino is what we used to call him, but I was over at his house and we were up late. I think we were playing Tiger Woods or something on Xbox. And I was trying to whisper, and this is me whispering. I was whispering, and he's like, your voice is just too deep, Cretney. It's too deep. Like you're waking up my dad. So then that's when I got the name Too Deep.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah. And then when I went to upload my music, Too Deep was already taken because obviously it's not that original of a
Mm.
saying. Like everybody says Too Deep, so everybody's already talking about me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I had to put 2020 on there, and I'm kind of regret it because 2020 is going to have such a bad stigma for all these years. Even though,
So I'll be like,
even
don't
though in
go
all
near that one.
honesty,
Yeah.
yeah. But in all honesty, 2020 has been a more. It's been a gift for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Mm.
I mean, there's so many people that I know that have come outside of their shell and stepped outside of their usual things that they're comfortable with, and have stepped up to bigger and better things, and just maybe flourished as a human being a little bit more because they've been forced to
Mm.
kind of look within themselves and see what it is that they wanted to do with all that time that everybody had stuck at home together.
Yeah. Well, it's true, right? Like I started my podcast over 2020 because I actually like had a little bit of time to process and think and like put it together. And I mean, I love it. Like this is one of my very favorite things to do is have these conversations with people like you. Like it's just my favorite thing. So I'm like, that's great. And like other things too. Like I went put my business online. Like there's all kinds of stuff. And I agree. I think when you have more time, you start reflecting more. And yeah, it's been a gift, I think, like you said, to a lot of people. And I think to some people it's been awful. But even in the midst of some of the bad things, we can learn. So I think it's safe to say it's been a gift to many.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 2020 we also, like, I worked for the first 3 or 4 months of the year, and that's actually when I wrote my album as well. I was working on this one job. I was working for a friend of mine who was the spread on the job, and uh, he was kind of lenient with me and allowed me to. When my helper had stuff to do, he'd let me be in my truck writing songs and practice. I was actually recording songs in my welding truck at
Oh,
work,
oh wow. Cool.
like with the welder running in the back, and I had my iRig studio mic hooked up to my phone and my garage band going in the mic in the truck, like rapping while he was out there welding and doing all my reference tracks that way. So
That's
so it
awesome.
was good that way. I mean, 3 months I wrote the album, and then we started working on the basement because our fourth baby was due in July, and I told Charity I'm gonna have the basement done before the fourth baby's here. I promise. I
Mm.
promise.
Hmm.
And then luckily we had saved up a bunch of money for taxes going into 2020, trying to catch up on the years prior, and so I was able to spend all my tax money on finishing my basement and living.
Wow.
So that's great. That's a great thing to look forward to here in the next year.
Yeah, right. But you know what? It's such a neat story, Jesse. Like, I just find it so fascinating. And that's why I really wanted to have this conversation, right? Because there's this like Alberta boy who grows up kind of in a rough situation. And like, there you are, like you said, you're in your welding truck, recording rap tunes, which is just like, it seems like such a contradiction in a way. And yet it's just so perfect, right? Like, it's so perfect because you're pursuing what you love, you're pursuing your passion. And so, yeah, I love that. Can you just tell our listeners, we're going to wrap it up right away here, but what is your music about?
My music, I like to convey a message of positivity as much as I can, as well as like a learning experience. The first album was kind of hastily written, I would say.
Mm,
Looking back at it now, like I said, I wrote it in 3 months. It was more or less the whole thing was written in a month, and then I just kind of went back and rewrote a bit of it. But because I had the the guy there set up to mix and master for a cheap deal, I kind of rushed into it, and I could have gotten a little bit more in depth with my writing, but I plan to do that in the future and evolve as an artist that way. But I like to try to convey a positive message and then also bring to light any of the negativity as well. And a lot of people don't take music, they don't respect it the way that it should be respected in many ways. Like, yes, music's fun to just vibe to and stuff, and I get that. And there's a lot of songs that I listen to that have a lot of messages that I necessarily don't really condone just because of my children. And like, I grew up, I used to listen to a lot of nasty rap music and other music that was just, um, well, it's an influence, right? If you're listening to songs that are singing or rapping, like a lot of country songs sing about drinking on almost every song.
Mm-hmm.
And if a person has an alcohol problem, they're going to be thinking about alcohol when maybe they weren't thinking about it. And it's, so music is a tool. And if you don't use it with the proper kind of respect, then, you could influence kids into doing stuff that you wouldn't want them doing, or you wouldn't condone your kids doing, or whatever, right? So I like to think of music as an opportunity to teach. It's a teachable opportunity. And then also the positivity is important to push out there, because without positivity, and like, it doesn't matter how bad your day is, if you can just be like, hey, we're gonna get through this, and if you have a good outlook, things can be so much better than they are otherwise.
I'm so glad you said that, Jesse. Like, I love that message. Like, if you don't get anything out of this whole podcast, but you hear this, it's that the things that we listen to affect what we do. Right? Like, you can't tell me you're watching some trashy movie, you're listening to trashy music, and whatever trashy is to you, that's probably very relative as well. But you're listening to this stuff that's influencing you in a negative way, and to say, no, that's not going to get to me, or your teenage kids or whatever kids saying, oh no, like, that doesn't bother me. It's gonna bother you. The people that you surround yourself with, the stuff that you listen to, the movies that you watch, the books you read, it all affects you so profound.
The news.
Don't
listen to the news.
Yeah, I'm the same.
And that's a real key to success. If you don't want to be feeling miserable, don't listen to the news. Don't watch the news. I can't even listen to mainstream radio. I don't watch any mainstream TV. The moment I do, I start to feel all this anxiety and stuff. So I just completely turned it off. And actually, come to mention it, I actually recently started a group on Facebook for any of you that don't know, which I'm sure none of you do out there. But it's also called Iconic Canon Records Live. And we've been hosting live music events with artists from all genres and from all over the world. And we're going to continue to run a series of events hosting talent from all over the world to showcase what they've been working on, which is really fun. And it's been really helping me keep my mind off of what's going on out in the world and all the craziness. So yeah, if anybody wants to come and check out some live music, feel free to join the group. I think maybe Carla can post the link in the comments or something.
Yeah, I should be able to get a link somewhere. And if you aren't sure how to connect, I'll maybe say right now, what's the best way for them to connect to you? Would you say Facebook? Would you say like email? Like, what's the best way for them to either look at your music or just find you?
Well, I would say, Facebook. You can find me under my legal name, Jesse Cretney.
Okay.
Or you're going to have that posted up when you.
I'll put it on my Facebook. Yeah. And if anybody doesn't know, like, how do I get a hold of this guy? We just get a hold of me. I'll hook you up. Like, it'll be fine. I'll send you to the group. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, Deezer, YouTube Music, Google Music, everything that you can purchase or listen to music on.
And if you don't know which one to listen on, go to Apple, because Jesse will benefit more if you go listen to him on Apple Music. Right?
So will all the other musicians. If you want to support music, then support music the best way possible.
That's so good to know, because I had no idea about that, Jesse. No idea. But there's so many artists like that I want to support. And by the way, too, like, I was I'm doing the same thing, Jesse, as far as like not listen to the news, not just get that out of there. The people that are posting it all over Facebook, all this COVID stuff, like, just unfollow them, or just like don't comment, don't like it, just let it pass by, and eventually you'll stop seeing it. And like, people say, oh, Carly, you're sticking your head in the sand. Darn right I am. Like, I'm sticking it deep in the sand, because I don't want to have all this negativity and all this nonsense. I hear enough. If I need to go check the Alberta Health website, figure out what the new regulations are, whatever, I can, but I don't need to have all this nonsense. And I'm doing the same thing. I've been running events online, like, just lots of stuff to just like, let's think about something else. Let's do something else, because we're all just sitting in our homes or our work trucks or whatever. What else are we going to do? We can't go out here. We can't go out there. So we're just going to listen to the news and let all this negativity in. And it's no wonder people are like kind of freaking out, right? Like it's
and feeling depressed and stuff. Like, take this time and opportunity to better yourself and move forward in your life, and try to work on yourself. If you're stuck at home for some reason, like if you're living in the cities over on the east or something, and they're on way more of a tighter lockdown than we are right now, like, take that time to better yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Make something of it. Do what you wanted to do all the time. Learn how to play a harmonica.
Yeah, that's right. Totally. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jesse. This has been just a real privilege to be able to talk to you. I love your story. I love what you shared. And like, I hope people will go check out your album, check you out on Facebook. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Jesse, is there any closing words, any last words that you want to say to anybody?
Well, make sure you join my Facebook group and come and check out all the artists. I've been putting in a lot of work to try to bring in some talented artists to come and share their craft with us. So that's one of my biggest goals right now. And then throughout this year, I'm planning on releasing as much music as I can. I actually have a producer now that I'm working with, working on some custom beats. So that's going to be very exciting. I'll get to have put my own kind of taste into the music rather than just the lyrics.
Awesome.
So I'm very excited about that. And then, I don't know, just try to have fun, stay safe.
Yeah.
All that good stuff.
And I love your Facebook group. Like, they have to go check that out too. There's like amazing artists in there that are sharing their gifts to the world. And I've already invited some people into that group, and I'll be inviting more people, because it's a real pleasure to just be able to go in there and be like, oh, there's this artist, and oh, there's that artist. And then you can go check out their page. You can support them, and you can pick and choose, because there's so many different genres in there, right? So if you don't like this one, fine, but maybe you'll like that one. So I really love what you're doing in there too. So yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, a little bit of something for everybody.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jesse. Really appreciate this. Loved our conversation.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.